Hi, I'm Tyler, and this is the Fox Valley Film Critics. In this episode of the show, we're going to be reviewing the next in the AFI's lineup of top 100 American films, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, as well as the newest Cloverfield movie, The Cloverfield Paradox. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to the show, brought to you by Groupthink Productions and FVTV. Joining us once again today is Groupthink Productions executive producer Darrin.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Good to have you on the show again.
You bet.
So I know you were excited for this segment.
So let's lead us off. So
E.T.
Okay. Now, this is a motion picture that back in the day I saw in the theaters, and I will admit it was a dusty theater because it kind of made me sad back in the day. And when I went to rewatch that to prep for today's event, you know what? It just didn't age well.
You think so?
I don't think so at all. And certain part of it, it's very much reliant in certain circumstances on the special effects. And at the end of the motion picture, when the kids are bicycling through the sky, oh, they're just biking in front of a green screen. That effect didn't quite seem as awe-inspiring as I remember that being in the theater. The spacecraft, when it comes down at the end of the motion picture, it was just a couple of years previously he'd done Close Encounters, and it's like he was making, kind of making use of the same spacecraft.
Yeah, the prop.
Yeah, exactly. They had going to use it, and it just didn't seem to come off quite as well, and so I was just, I kind of feel sad watching that a little bit. So I don't know what your thoughts were in terms of what you got.
I reviewed this recently from a part of my Spielberg marathon on my blog. And having watched it again for the first time since I was younger, I was surprised that I wasn't terribly huge on it. I think a lot of people watch this when they're young. I'm probably making a lot of people mad right now, but it's something that's clearly kind of I guess I would call this a kids' film or family film.
Absolutely.
You can kind of see the culture that's kind of formed around the film, though, and that's kind of almost bigger than the movie itself, because I think this was the highest-grossing film at the time it was released.
Absolutely.
I think Spielberg was making bets with George Lucas over which of his films was going to be the bigger earner, like that or Star Wars.
Well, clearly Spielberg lost out on 1941, so.
Yes, Spielberg, the acclaimed director of 1941 and Always, as South Park points out.
One of the, looking back at the film now, it's looked through a little bit of a different lens. There was a famed movie critic, Michael Medved, who for years and years was on PBS and wrote about a trait that a lot of films have, not just E.T., but a lot of films have. And so a little bit more in terms of Michael Medved, he's also the person that would write what are called the Golden Turkey Awards. And noted that Burgess Meredith had what was considered to be one of the most unfortunate nude scenes in Hollywood history. But again, that's not really important right now. But Michael Medved's thought was specifically that kids know best. That's one of the main themes that come across in E.T., that Elliot is the one that is with E.T. that knows, and the fact that really when the adults come in, it's frightening. But one thing I didn't really understand is how they're introducing that is they're making all the adults and all the security people that are building up around the house once they discover E.T. is living in the house, they have to walk up the street. Why can't they just drive? I mean, there's a lot of vehicles. They need to do a lot. They can walk. They don't have to be in those astronaut outfits for so long. It just seemed like that was, just really hard on all those, the security people and the scientists, making them walk around so far and so long in those big bulky outfits. And they come into the house, and it's absolutely frightening. And it was intentionally done that way to make most adults in that motion picture faceless, almost like the trombone sound in Charlie Brown. That you don't want to see a face, and the only adults that you really get to see much of would be the mother, and would be the kind scientist who's trying to reach out and to get an appreciation of how Elliot truly connects with E.T.
Oh.
Exactly. So those are the adults that you see. Everybody else is almost faithless, or they intentionally make them so by use of those really astronaut suits that they have them in. And to think about it even more so is, they're seen as so frightening, but realistically there was a legitimate concern here. You have something from another planet. We really don't know anything about it.
It's clearly making the kid sick.
Yes. If he makes the kid sick, is it going to make everybody else sick?
It
Do
clearly
we have
has
an Andromeda strain scenario going on here?
It has psychic properties, so it's clearly linking with people around it.
And of course, the people the adults are bad because they're trying to learn about it. And so that was really the concept there that was displayed again and again and again, that kids know best.
Yes, there's kind of a pathology you can see with Spielberg in this, because when I was looking back into his history a little for the marathon, one of the things you find out relatively quickly is that his parents were divorced when he was a kid. And you can kind of tell that it's clearly bothering him long into his adulthood, because fatherhood is something that you see a lot in his films. Like, you see it in Indiana Jones, you see it in Jaws, you see it in Close Encounters, really in Close Encounters, where the father just abandons the family so he can hang out with the aliens. It's like,
yes.
Like, it's very, very, fatherhood abandonment is very present in his films. And so having the scene where, I believe, I don't remember if it's specifically the father who was in the suit initially, but he's one of the scientists. So him coming back in that form is just like, that's super Freudian.
Exactly. Now, going back to the Richard Dreyfuss character, because there was such a similarity between the spaceship in Close Encounters and E.T., in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, is Richard Dreyfuss going to, come home? Is he going to come out? They're going to do an exchange. We'll drop off Richard Dreyfuss.
You get E.T.
and they'll take E.T. back.
That would have been the greatest thing.
Yes! But
my.
alas, it didn't happen that way.
Yeah, I don't think he was. They didn't do cinematic universes then like they do now. No. Then Nick Fury shows up in the after credits scene.
And for good reason. So again, E.T. there was not the blooper reel at the end of E.T. either.
It's not. You don't have the Monsters Inc. blooper reel at the end of the movie.
Now, there were some, certainly there were some wonderful moments in the picture. And again, back in the day, I know when I saw a very, very powerful film, and certainly I recognize those elements there. And there's also some fun pieces when they do a homage to The Quiet Man. And so when Elliot is releasing all of the frogs so that they don't get cut up in science class, in grade school science class, and E.T.'s watching while he's getting drunk at home, is watching The Quiet Man on TV, and Elliot, because they are so intermeshed, is performing the same action as John Wayne did when he first meets up.
They used to get away with so much more in kids' movies.
And the fact that one child had to lay on the floor so they could stand on top of him so he'd be at the same level. That's a bad job. You get to be in a Steven Spielberg movie, and what's your job? You have to lie on the floor so the star can stand on top of you.
What kind of credit is that?
I don't know.
Guy sitting on floor.
Lying on floor. It's like, oh, that's kind of sad.
I was kind of cycling through. I mentioned earlier all of the kind of pop culture references from like the references to this film, and as I was cycling through them earlier, I remembered the great scene from the Hunt for Red October novel, where they've gotten, it's late in the novel, so they have all the Russians on board the American sub at this point,
Right.
and they at one point they start showing them movies, and one of them was E.T. And it's this great little moment of all these hardened Russian battle-ready generals just crying over E.T. and it's like, this is so beautiful. So it's just like,
Yeah.
well, it's clear this movie's doing something right.
Yeah, no, so clear. It is where it is because of the way that it pulls the heartstring. As I said, in looking back, it's just didn't quite have that same impact as it did back in the day, for me at least. But that doesn't diminish it in terms of what it meant at the time, and the fact that for so many people, it meant a lot, and clearly it allowed a lot of folks to sell finger extensions with little flashlights on the end, so that was a good thing as well.
Stranger Things needed something else to rip off. So. That's all the time we have for this segment. Join us for the next segment where we'll be discussing the Cloverfield paradox. Stay tuned.
Does this help at all?
Anything helps, ma'am. Just try to get some sleep now.
I can't sleep.
Yeah, me neither. I'm on my way.
The Cloverfield Paradox is the third film in the ever-growing Cloverfield expanded universe, which I'm assuming is going to take about 500 films now. So, in all the realms of expanded universes that we have to deal with now, including Marvel, DC, the Universal monster movies, and now we have Cloverfield.
Yeah. Now, the way that they rolled this out was very unique. So I was following Twitter on Super Bowl Sunday, and matter of fact, I texted you as soon as I saw this, where it says, hey, they're going to release, Netflix is probably going to release the new Cloverfield movie after the Super Bowl. Okay, you got me. I'm good. I'm home. I'm done with the game, and I could use some additional entertainment at around 9 o'clock on a Sunday night. I'm in. I'm with you. And it took me 3 opportunities to get through it. I fell asleep watching it Super Bowl night. A couple days later, all right, well, let's try and figure out where I left off. And I fell asleep again. Finally, I figured out maybe it's just because timing-wise, I'm trying to watch this. I'll start earlier in the day, and I made it through it. And, well, I almost wish I hadn't.
Okay, so let's kind of go over this slightly because we can get a timeline going.
Yes.
So Cloverfield came out in 2008. It was pretty good, but it had an amazing marketing push to it where they didn't tell you anything that was going to be in the movie.
Yeah.
And this is because it's from J.J. Abrams, and he produced Lost, and he has this, if you go watch his TED Talk sometime, he has this incredibly pretentious thing about the mystery box, where he's like, I'm not going to sell you a movie, I'm going to sell you a mystery. I'm going to sell you something that you want to know about. You want to know the answers, which is why every single one of his movies has lies to you in the trailer, so you'd have to figure out what actually happens in the movie. It's like, who is, what's his name? The actor who plays Sherlock playing in Star Trek Into Darkness. What's actually happening in Star Wars The Force Awakens? What is Super 8? But it's always sold on this pretentious,
Right.
like, something important is going to happen kind of deal. And then you see it, and it's a slick movie, and it's fine. And then 2 years ago, we got the 10 Cloverfield Lane, which is like the coolest movie ever, except for all the parts of it that have to do with Cloverfield. It's just, which is you can kind of tell, you can tell which parts are which, because the parts that are good, and then you can clearly, then the parts that are clearly reshoots are obvious.
Yeah. And it has, John Goodman was so wonderful in 10 Cloverfield Lane, and just the one moment where they're trying to guess, playing guessing games, and it ends up he's playing Santa Claus. I just thought was one of the quirkiest, strangest moments, but it ended up being a laugh line. And
Oh my.
Yes.
But it's so good, except for the last 10 minutes. But it's such a great movie.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of be their hook with this. So that we're gonna get all these young new filmmakers and just do these Cloverfield spin-offs where they're just pastiches. So we'll do like a space movie, and then I think the next one's gonna be like a World War II movie. And at some point, I'm assuming they're just gonna do like a straight-up Cloverfield sequel. That's actually just the monster, because they keep teasing him.
Yeah.
And every single movie, they're teasing something is going on, but I'm assuming at some point they're going to continue it properly. But for now, we're not getting it. But
okay, so the movie itself is set in outer space.
Cloverfield Paradox.
Yes, the Cloverfield Paradox. It is on a space station, and the Earth is in a dystopian future, not too distant from where we're at.
I don't think it's a dystopian future though, because it's clearly supposed to be set before the first movie in 2008, kind of, sort of. Even though I'm pretty sure it's set in 2018, so there's no continuity.
Right.
So.
But it was a world where they're waiting and they need what they're doing on the spaceship to provide the world with abundant, cheap energy, which is the reason why I was suggesting it's kind of a dystopian future.
Yes.
I shouldn't have been taken in by the marketing piece that you mentioned a moment ago, simply because, well, if they're releasing, why aren't they releasing this in the theaters? They're just releasing it on Netflix. That should have been my first, warning sign, red alert. This
Here's the
probably
thing. That could have been a sign of progress. We're getting to a point where movie theaters are starting to get panicky because they're losing profits, and Netflix is huge, and everyone wants to stay home and watch Netflix. So if this was going to be the first step in like Hollywood just full on going entirely to digital and barely acknowledging the movie theaters anymore, like, because I just went and saw Annihilation last night, and I went to this like relatively inexpensive theater, and they've completely renovated all their seats with the lean back chairs and fresh popcorn and stuff like that. And it's like you can tell they're desperate to get people in the theaters. So if this was just the first step in, we're gonna release this big budget blockbuster that everyone's gonna want to see just on Netflix, and people are gonna go out of their way from the Super Bowl just to watch this film. That could have completely changed the game. That could have been like the first step where we see like maybe a big superhero movie does that next, or maybe like a big director, because Martin Scorsese is gonna have a gangster movie coming out next year on Netflix. So this could have been like the hugest thing, but recently all the Netflix movies have been really terrible. Like Death Wish was terrible, Bright was terrible. This is not good at all. It's a really haphazardly made science fiction movie, made worse by reshoots, clearly to tie it into Cloverfield.
Yeah.
And you can tell which scenes of the Cloverfield shots, because they're either all inserts or they're all like audio bits. Like there's that one really cringy one near the beginning where you see the television broadcast, and it's just like, this experiment could release monsters on Earth.
Okay. Plot point, foreshadowing was also on the scroll at the bottom of the TV.
It's like the sitcom where they roll back and the audience applause sign is showing in the audience. Beep, 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 beep.
Yeah. So, what was wanting so much to be a good experience just didn't quite work, although there were some moments.
It's a morbidly fascinating movie.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of really weird stuff. Like I remember I watched it twice back to back when it first came out, and I wanted to just kind of understand what was happening in it. But there really isn't a clear link. But there's these like Evil Dead-esque body horror scenes where these strange things happen, like an arm comes to life and starts writing, and the arm tells them to start digging through the carcass of one of their fellow pilots where they find something. and I have no idea how that would have worked. And there's a vague explanation about how all these supernatural events are happening that doesn't make any sense.
And there's some just horrible gross out moments too that they threw in for, I just don't know why it had to be.
Like the woman who appears within the bowels of the spaceship and has wires coming through her because she just teleported there randomly.
Yes, and the worm scene, very disturbing.
I forget which one that was.
It's so involving, well, let's again. So
Everyone that's seen this that's going to see it.
yep. Well, there's a scene where the worms explode out of somebody.
So it's Alien, but bad.
Yes. Yeah, even worse because we don't get to think about also the scene from Spaceballs where it jumps up and does the...
They could have sung a chorus.
Exactly. Like the frog from
Like
Warner
a
Brothers.
1,000-part harmony with little worms.
Exactly. But it didn't happen, and so
Why did they have worms aboard the spaceship?
I don't know that.
This is a space station specifically designed to test for, like, energy. Second point, why do they have a space station specifically designed for one purpose? Like, you'd think they just go up there and use the one that's already there.
Well, it needed to be...
In an energy crisis.
Yes. Yeah.
They can afford to ship this enormous space station in space, but not much else.
Right.
Oh my. Do you think that Cloverfield 4 still gets made at this point?
My guess is that it's been green-lighted, and there's a universe to exploit, and so it will be exploited.
Do you feel any of your answers from the first Cloverfield movie are answered now?
I'm just trying to figure out why in the world that they weren't able to get rid of it when they bombed New York back in 2008.
It's taller than the clouds now. Because, I guess minor spoiler, but this shouldn't be a huge spoiler because you would expect to see it at some point. You do see Clover at the very end of the movie, and it's implied that the spaceship is the one that you see in the found footage segment at the end of the first Cloverfield movie, I guess, because there's that one shot where you see the satellite crashing down. So I'm guessing that's implied to be that. But when you see Clover, and she's taller than the clouds now, even though the first Clover was like maybe 50 feet?
I would say more like a
couple stories.
Well, more than that. It was, remember, because it reached up. It for a monster, it had pretty good arms, so
Well, yeah.
It reached up and knocked a helicopter down at the end. So
Yeah.
that's pretty substantial.
But yeah, very disappointing movie overall, but fascinating marketing experiment. So that's all the time we have for this segment. Join us for the final segment where we'll be getting our movie recommendation for the week. Stay tuned.
Good coffee, huh? Oh my God! What are you doing in my apartment?
Hello, welcome back to the final segment. We're now turning things over for the movie recommendation.
Thank you very much. As I was thinking about, I guess I need a movie recommendation. This week I have been very Atomic Blonde focused. I went out and got the DVD. I really liked the soundtrack, and so I actually bought a CD. And watching the director commentary mentioned something and kind of made me think back to this motion picture, which won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Film in 2006, called The Lives of Others. And what made me think about it was a comment that when they were testing Atomic Blonde, a lot of the younger viewers at the test really didn't There was a wall in Berlin? What?
Oh, no.
They had no recollection of that, and so if you want to kind of get more of understanding of why the wall had to come down at the end of Atomic Blonde, this is a motion picture in a very much dramatic form that talks about that. It was a movie that was described as when this one individual first saw it, he wanted to run out in the street and say, "You have to come into this motion picture. This is so important. You need to watch it." It was about East Germany during the 1980s and the secret police and how individuals were spied on, how the state, through the East German secret police called the Stasi, was so all-powerful that at one point the East German Stasi member was riding an elevator with a small child, and the child just makes an off-the-hand comment about how police can't be trusted, and so he pulled out his pen. "Who's your father?" That would have made that comment that I need to investigate, and then he stopped himself, because that was the moment you realized that he was being turned essentially for the better, and realizing that there were other things out there that were more important. And it's just to see the hands, the all-powerful hands of the state being turned against individuals to ruin people's lives, and just done so for those purposes. And it was just an amazingly powerful picture, knowing how they would choose to do that and how they would choose to ruin people's lives.
Yeah, if these kids are eating Tide Pods, Dad, of course they don't know what the Berlin Wall is.
Given the fact that now we just passed the mark where the Berlin Wall has now been down longer than it was up.
Really?
Really?
That's pretty nuts. But like it's been a while since I've watched it. But last time I watched it, the thing that kind of stuck out to me was just kind of how quiet and mundane a lot of it is. Like it's a very mundane kind of evil, where you're seeing just like people casually destroy each other's lives with just sentences, and it's like just exactly what you said with the scene in the elevator. It's just like, what was your father's name? Because you know he's going to end up in the concrete section of a building at some point. So
yeah. Another incident where young Stasi officers were sitting around lunch and making a joke about the head of the East German government, Heinecker, and at one point one of the senior officers was enjoying the joke, and then promptly turned and suggested that, "Oh, by the way, you're probably not going to be a police officer anymore since you're making fun of the head of state." It was like, well, I didn't
that was the
really
most terrifying scene.
Yes.
That's all the time we have for this episode of the Fox Valley Film Critics. You can follow me on... Yeah, he watched the movie. You can follow me on Twitter at antisocialcriti. That's critic without the C at the end. You can find more of my reviews at antisocialcritic.tumblr.com, as well as Geeks Under Grace. And you can find past recordings of the show at the Groupthink Productions YouTube page. I'm Tyler with the Fox Valley Film Critics. Have a wonderful day.